All right, Will, you just took the PMP. You did really well. How'd it go? How'd it go?
Uh, Honestly, when I was during the test, I wasn't feeling too confident about
Yeah,
how
okay.
things were were turning out. But at the end, when I gone back and reviewed what I could, I finally just said, "Screw it." I hit it, and it said pass. And then when I got my results, I was above
Above target.
above target and everything. So I was like, "Wow, I guess I knew it better than I thought."
Yeah. They don't give you above target. Like that's you did as well as you could do. So that's pretty cool.
Right?
All right, sweet. So we have how long have we known each other? Like it's not that long, right? Like
Yeah,
a couple weeks.
maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
That's not so bad. So talk to me a little bit about kind of your journey to the PMP. Everybody's got a story. Like what's the ups and the downs? How did you get here, man?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned when we first met, I'm
Mm-hmm.
transitioning out of the military, getting in the civilian sector. So
Nice.
never had a need for the official cert while I was in the military, but now in the civilian world I do. So
Yeah.
I took one of the typical uh, boot camp courses recommended by a buddy that had taken it, and it just wasn't doing it for me the way it was laid out. I
Yeah.
stumbled across yours, and then we spoke. I jumped on the 7-day train, and about 10 days later, I tested and met with my success.
Met with your success. Well, I'm glad you two were able to meet. That's cool. So what was different? Like you and I were in a bunch of calls together and, we talked through questions and, it was good for both of us. It's fun for me because you challenge a lot, which is good. What was different than the boot camp and the way we did things in the accelerator with the videos and the coaching and stuff like that?
Uh, well, I mean, one of the biggest differences is laid out by process group versus knowledge area.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk in the I'd say the typical boot camp. They talk about how your process areas, but then they teach everything by your knowledge areas, and obviously the PIM box laid out by knowledge area. But
Yeah.
you mind your as you said, the logical flow is by process group. So if you're looking at just initiating,
Mm-hmm.
initiating and closing, that's like 30% of your test if you add a two up or something like that. I don't remember my numbers, but
Something like that. Yeah.
if you could just focus on those two process areas, you're good to hook. But the way the others do, you can't do it. I mean, the logical flow is not there. So
Yeah. That's cool. So like moving from like the military, you've been working things for a long time. Like what kind of work do you do in the military? Yeah. Or did you do?
so I started out early in my career as a artillery officer, then I shifted to logistics. But
Okay.
from even in those two branches, I was an operations guy. So
Hmm.
everything's this project based. It's just like one project after another. I guess a prime example that everybody would be familiar with is if you're planning to deploy over to the
Hmm.
Middle East, Iraq or Afghanistan. So I mean, you got a target out there that you got to meet as far as getting your unit ready to go. So
Yeah.
that's sort of the charter, if you would, and
Hmm.
and you lay out all your milestones and build your schedule and
Hmm.
everything, and you got to meet it. And you're always going back and talking to quote the sponsor, which would be your boss, on
Yeah.
where you are, what the statuses are, and you got to make those left and right corrections based off your risk and things of that nature. So you operations guys
Hmm.
in the military and others too. I mean, that's
Hmm.
all they do is project management. But there's no reason to have a PMP cert. So
Yeah. You got
the
a job to do.
experience is there, just needed the cert for the civilian side.
What was the biggest, like for like military guys and girls that might be listening and stuff? What's the biggest, like, is there like a mental shift or like a vernacular or how things are done or the way things are like, what's the biggest, was there any big shift that you had to make?
I think the biggest thing, and I don't know if it was you or
Mhm.
I'd read it somewhere else. One of the biggest challenges for someone that has a lot of project management experience
Yeah.
is the experience gets in the way of learning the quote PMBOK process and methodology.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would catch myself. I'd read a question, but when I first started out, and, like blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what would you do? And I was like, well, I'm going to do this because, hey, that's what you do in
Yeah.
real world.
Yeah.
But hey, guess what? PMBOK says you don't do that. You got a certain process you go through. So that right there would trip me up a little bit. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was one of the things you sort of had to undo.
That's cool. I mean, like that, I think that's one of the first things when like guys come in, they're like, hey, I've been doing this for 35 years. I got to do it now to get out or to get a job or whatever. Same kind of thing. Like, oh, well, we do this. And so how do you reconcile that in your head? Do you think there's any use to like some of the solutions that they provide to say, hey, we should do this? Or is it all just PMI? Like, it's a gamble that I asked that question, but no big deal.
It took me, I think I mentioned when we first met that, I understood the material.
Yeah.
Where I was getting tripped up is when I would start going in and doing practice tests and things like that.
Yeah.
It was translating that quote, academic knowledge into that practical knowledge. And I mean, that's what you got to be able to do on the test.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where the flips
Mm-hmm.
or where I tripped the trigger on that. It just sort of fell into place after going through your process.
Okay.
I'd hitting. I think I sent you a message one day, and I was like, "Hey, I'm tracking the material, but the test says I'm failing miserably." And you're just like, "Hey, stick to the process." So I followed it, and one day it just sort of fell into place.
Yeah.
And then there were certain, I'd say, patterns that you sort of pick up on
Mm-hmm.
on a test.
Yeah.
It's not that there's you can go take the test and it's like, well, hey,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you know this right here, you're good. I mean, but there are patterns, I think you explained it one day, is what are you looking at something that's going to fix the solution today, or are you looking at something that's going to fix the solution for the remainder of the project?
Yeah.
And into the future. And that right there was sort of a shift to
Yeah.
looking at it that way.
Yeah, that's a big one. And like, especially for guys that are in the fight, not literally, but like moving, doing a lot of projects, doing these things. Like, I think myself included, we get used to saying like, okay, what is it? Like, boom, I'll just react and work and push it forward and keep going and I'll clean up the mess later. The PMI world has the luxury of saying like, hey, let's, because there is no real boss. It's just a question. And so like you can clean it up a little bit. You're like, hey, let's take a more disciplined approach. Let's take some time to document these things, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas like in the real world, boss might not allow you to do that or different stuff. So I think that's good. How about the coaching calls and stuff? Like you were always there and you took it head on with the questions. How was the learning curve, or what was it like to be in those question solving sessions for you, man?
Well, now, I got truth in lending here. So I did the hard questions with you each week, but I never was able to get in on the coaching calls. And
Okay. Yeah.
so
Okay. Yeah.
I think those right there were beneficial. My last assignment, I was an education program manager for the Army. And, one of the best ways that we teach our soldiers and stuff to learn something is through practical exercises. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just an hour and a half of practical exercising
Mm-hmm.
on attacking what a PMP question would look like. And then hearing the feedback and the logic that other individuals apply to breaking those tests down, and then your experience on explaining it if we're sort of straying off left or right
Yeah.
was really beneficial.
That's cool. Well, that's good. I mean, when you went into the exam, how are you feeling? Like nervous or relatively confident, or how are you feeling at the beginning?
I mean, I guess I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a little anxiety, but I mean, I've dealt with that stuff so long. I just know how to deal with it. So it wasn't too bad. Uh, I was more concerned about, the kids or someone
Running in, yeah.
busting in and
Yeah.
things like that. And then when I first started off, I got everything set up, and then said, we'll start in 15 minutes. And all of a sudden I get a banner that pops up and says, hey, we're sorry we didn't start in 15 minutes. If we can't get this fixed within so long, we'll contact you and reschedule. And then
Jesus.
I jumped on the helpline and all that. And all of a sudden the test started. And like I said, I was off rocking and rolling. But again, you know, as I was going through and answering my test, I think I finished. I had like 48 minutes left on the exam when I finished.
Jesus.
I moved through the questions pretty fast, if you remember, in our hard questions. But I didn't have that warm feeling like, oh man, I'm smoking this or anything like that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how well I'm doing on this. But you know, it didn't stress me out or anything. I just kept moving forward and applying the process that you teach. And obviously it worked out. So
I mean, that's the way it goes. Like I don't think anybody, I would worry if someone was like, oh, I'm killing it, I'm getting 100% right. Like these questions can be squirrely, and there can be like, well, you know what, who knows, kind of feelings there. But yeah, obviously it did work. Something worked. You can't luck yourself into 5 above targets. I mean, I didn't get that, so you're good. So that's cool. For people out there that might see themselves like in you a little bit, like, you know, been around, experienced stuff, maybe coming out of the military, want to get it, like, what would you say would be, like, what would your recommendations for those people who need to get the exam cleaned up in the next, you know, couple weeks or months or whatever?
I mean, for me, I mean, obviously I'll promote your philosophy and course because it works. But you know what I say, you know, don't fool around with learning that crap by knowledge area. Learn it by process groups. I mean, if you're going to, in the real world, apply it by knowledge area, then you should learn it by knowledge area.
Yeah. But I don't think that actually happens in the real, like, I can't find an example where they're like, oh, we're only going to talk about like how we're doing schedule for like the next 2 weeks. And I'm like, I mean, this would take forever.
Well, I mean, you know, what I've found is you don't have much PMP vernacular that rolls out there unless you're doing something as far as trying to pick up a PDU or something.
Right.
But it's, I mean, that laying out that project, you know, you gotta know what the boss's left and right limits are, what he's willing to accept. He's going to tell you where your left and right limits are. To start you off. You're going to build your team. You got to lay out your schedule. You're going to make adjustments to your schedule. You got to track your budgets and all that stuff. So that's how it really works. So if that's how it really works, then you should learn it that way. You shouldn't learn it a different way. Because I mean, that'd be equivalent to apply a sports analogy, practicing one way and then playing a different way on game day. Well, there's teams that do that. You never see them in the Super Bowl or the World Series or the playoffs. So there's something to be said about practicing how you're going to play, or as we say in the military, you know, train how you're going to fight, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's dead on right. And like when I started thinking more, I know after this we'll talk about ideas for making this thing better. But like when I started thinking about like where to spend all our time, and basically I didn't really think a ton about it. It was like I had to get people through quickly. And so I was going like, where am I going to invest my time for them to be best? It was, let's just talk through what you're going to have to do, not in a theoretical, like, hey, you're going to sit and take tests for 4 hours. Let's talk about how you sit in your chair and stuff. No, it's like, let's walk through what your brain's going to go through in these questions. Like, talk me through. You have the luxury now. You go fast, but like normal students, maybe not as fast, but like talk me through the questions. And like, that's where we spend most of our time live. And so, yeah, I think that's the same kind of mantra you're talking about, like, you know, train how you want to play or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a good one. Cool. So now that you got this done, what's next for you? What's the next steps? And it's application for job, or what's the deal? What are you going for next?
Oh, I've actually already accepted a position. Okay. So I start my next career on the 2nd of November.
There you go.
Doing programmatic stuff for the government as a contractor. So
well, that's good, man. Well, that is really, really good. Well, we're pumped that you did that. And you did so well. You get this behind you and move on and do well for that new position and stuff. So that's good. All right. Anything else before we drop off that you want to share with people as far as like things that you talked a ton about, like the knowledge areas process group, like something that would help them out, or nuggets or something, anything that would be beneficial to these people as they start to jump into it and dive into like this preparation thing. Any thoughts?
Probably the best advice I'd give to anyone that's preparing to sit for their PMP is a take a deep breath as you're taking the test,
Yeah.
and read the question,
Mm-hmm.
because I do recall when I was doing my practice that, because I go so fast, I would
Yeah.
trip up and then I'd go back and read, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, here's what the right answer is. Well, why the hell did I answer it this way? And then I go back, well, I didn't read the question.
Yeah.
I skipped over the not, or,
Mm-hmm.
I immediately jumped. It was looking for the process group. Well, no, it wasn't looking for the process group. It was looking for some IDO or
Mm-hmm.
something within that process group. So, take a deep breath, take your time, read the question, apply the last sentence first to gain your bearing, and then in context, and then read the rest of it. Read all four answers
Mm-hmm.
first
Yeah.
before you truly commit to your final answer. And
Yeah.
you've got enough time. I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, I had 48 minutes to spare after I got done, and I wasn't sprinting.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just motoring through it
Yeah.
logically and taking my time.
Hmm.
If you're prepared, you'll have the time,
You'll have the time.
and you'll have the time to spare too.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I think that's really great advice. I mean, I can't add much to that. That a lot of times the reason why people miss questions is because they don't know what's being asked. Like they think they do, but then they go back into it like, oh, like, yeah, I didn't read the details there. It's like, okay, yeah, let's invest some time reading the details of like what they're really trying to get us to solve for. And then, then we can go forth. So that's awesome, man. Well, I'm happy for how well you did. I appreciate you jumping into the program, and you helped a lot of other people in the way in which you kind of tack things on a daily basis. So we're grateful for that. So good job. And we'll look forward to hanging out and seeing how you're doing in the new job, and anything we can do to help or learn from you. We'd love to be there. So appreciate it, man.
Sounds good.
Cool. Right on.